Are you terrified by the warnings of experts like Geoffrey Hinton, who say there's a 50% chance that superintelligent AI could cause literal human extinction, maybe in less than 10 years? Are you sick and tired of AI companies' recklessness and the lack of urgency with which the rest of the world is responding to this problem? Well, you can do something about it. In this video, I'm going to share 5 things that you can do starting today to protect yourself and your family from the stupidity of AI companies. These are all actions that anyone can do. You don't need to change your career. You don't need a degree in machine learning. We're going to go in order of difficulty, and we're going to start with the poster child of slacktivism, which is signing a petition. Now, there are a few around on this topic, but the one I'm going to suggest is the statement on Superintelligence, which now has over 130,000 signatures. It came out in September last year, and lots of big names signed it. AI safety experts like Nobel laureate Geoffrey Hinton, the world's most cited living scientist Yoshua Bengio, and the ask is pretty reasonable. We call for a prohibition on the development of superintelligence not lifted before there is broad scientific consensus that it will be done safely and controllably, and there's strong public buy-in. It cites the risks of loss of control, job loss, and human extinction as its reasons. Now, I'm not going to sit here and inflate the potential impact of one additional signature to these petitions, but it's not nothing. The more people that sign it, the clearer it is to lawmakers that people are scared and they want an end to this race. And we should take all of those opportunities when they come up. If you do go ahead and sign this petition, I'd say that the main benefit isn't actually the impact of signing the petition itself, but it's just that you're putting yourself in the mindset of someone that doesn't just sit back and allow AI companies to threaten our lives, but you're someone who chooses to take action. You take this into your own hands, you take responsibility. Even though this first action, signing a petition, is very small, the benefit of taking that first step can be huge, and it can lead to much bigger things down the line. So action number 2 is ridiculously overpowered. It can take less than a minute, and the potential impact is ginormous. It's unbelievable. And that is contacting your political representatives to let them know that you want them to take action on the danger of superintelligent AI. Now, we are in a time where distrust of politicians seems to be at an all-time high, but I beg you, please do not give in to this simplistic defeatism of, oh, they're all only in it for themselves. They never look out for the ordinary person. Nothing's ever going to change. Of course, there is some truth in that, right? It would be naive to say that politicians are all angels that always tell the truth and always prioritize the public interest over their career. But it's also silly and wrong to claim that all politicians are just selfish bastards and they never do anything for ordinary people. The truth is somewhere in the middle between those 2 points. And of course, different politicians will like different points on that spectrum. And importantly, even when politicians in a democracy are prioritizing their career over the interests of the public, well, they want to make sure that they're going to be elected at the next election. So they want to know what their constituents' worries are and if there's anything that they can do to at least claim that they are addressing them. And also, it's important to remember that these politicians, it will be them and their families that are affected by this just as much as it will be you and your family. Politicians can take action on this on pure self-interest alone, right? They don't need to have an altruistic bone in their body. So in contacting them, not only are you trying to get them to do their job as a politician, but you're also saying, look, mate, your family's lives are at risk if you don't do something about this. They have a right to know as well as the rest of us do. We're now in early 2026 and we're increasingly seeing widespread outrage from the public at what AI companies are doing. And politicians are starting to speak up about it. In America, we've had Bernie Sanders, who is, as far as I know, the most popular politician in America. And he's calling for a complete moratorium on the construction of any new AI data center, which I fully support. Here in the UK, we had 60 politicians come together to demand that Google DeepMind address their violation of some safety commitments. And over 110 UK politicians have now signed a statement that explicitly says we want to mitigate the risk of extinction from superintelligence, and they support binding regulation to prevent those risks from occurring. And that number has been grown by ordinary people contacting their MP and asking them to sign the statement. You can do that right now on Control AI's website. They have an email ready for you to send, which you can personalize if you want. Again, I can't overstate just how much impact you get from this for such little effort. Politicians are there to represent you. And you have a right and a responsibility to give them a kick up the arse when they're failing to do that. The YouTuber Silly Conversations did a video where he speed ran this in 16 seconds, which as far as I know is the world record.
All right, I said send, world record. Oh my God, it's a world record.
Maybe you can try and beat his score. And he got thousands of his viewers to join him to email and call their politicians. If you're in the UK or the US, finding your politician's email is actually automated by the Control AI tool. But if you're not, it shouldn't be that difficult to find somewhere on the internet where you can get the contact information for your representative. Now, as the AI race is taking place mostly within one country, America, also to a lesser extent in China, the UK and France, you might feel like if you live outside those countries, you have no ability to influence things. But I don't think that's true. And that's because this conversation needs to happen on a global stage. Now, yes, we will need the support of both China and the US for any international treaty to be meaningfully implemented, but smaller nations can play their part in getting us to that point. So, for example, they could implement moratoriums within their own borders, which would provide a working example for the global community on how such a treaty would be enforced. And if any country becomes the first to come out and publicly endorse a global treaty that prohibits the development of superintelligent AI, which I think we could see this year, hopefully we do, that would open the Overton window, and it would force the world leaders of the other countries in maybe conversations at United Nations to at least stay what their position is and say, if they're not supporting a pause right now, why? And that allows journalists to criticize them. It allows the public to see this conversation in the open air, and it's not hidden, right? If you're in a smaller nation, you can still have an impact by contacting your politician. The third way you can make a difference here is a little bit more nebulous, but it's something that we all should be doing to some extent at least, and that's simply to let your family and friends know about this problem. Rob Benzinger of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute recently sent out a really long, detailed email to all of his friends and family, which I'll leave a link to if you want some inspiration. And he's chosen right now because we do seem to be at a turning point. Public awareness of the existential threat is increasing at a rapid pace, and we could see this movement explode very quickly. But of course, if you want to let your friends and family know about this problem, you don't have to write a really long, detailed essay. It can just be a conversation down the pub. It can be sharing things with people on social media. The more this issue is spoken about, the more salient it becomes, the higher it climbs up the ranking of importance of political issues, and the more unignorable it becomes. We are social creatures. Now, for better or for worse, many of our beliefs aren't really arrived at via rational means, but they're arrived at because that's what the people around us believe. And luckily, the idea that we should halt frontier AI development is becoming increasingly popular the more it's spoken about. It also, in my opinion, happens to be the position you arrive at if you honestly evaluate the evidence, but it is becoming more popular, and that helps in allowing people to be more comfortable in expressing their belief. I first became really worried about this issue in around 2022, and I joined PauseAI not long after, which we'll speak about shortly. And that wasn't the case back then. If you have been involved in AI safety for a while now, the extent of public awareness right now is like such a relief compared to the state it was in only 2 years ago. Now, one very striking example of this can be seen if we compare two clips of Joe Biden's press secretary. I think they're about a month apart. She's asked about the existential threat of AI, and just look how different her reaction is between these two clips.
There's an expert from the Machine Intelligence Research Institute who says that if there is not an indefinite pause on AI development, this is a quote, literally everyone on Earth will die. Would you agree that does not sound good?
Your delivery, Peter, is quite something.
It sounds crazy, but is it? There anything more dramatic?
I mean, you just read it.
Literally everyone on Earth will die.
Pretty dramatic. Pretty dramatic.
A group of experts now say that AI poses an extinction risk, right up there with nuclear war and a pandemic. Does President Biden agree?
The president and the vice president has been very clear on this as it relates to AI. It is one of the most powerful technologies, right, that we see currently. We must mitigate its risk, and that's what we're focusing on here in this administration.
So she went from complete dismissal to genuine concern in about a month. Now, that change and changes like it are the result of conversations with friends, social media, coverage on the news, 1,000 small things that all add up to make the issue impossible to ignore and impossible to deny. That press secretary was reacting to a responding conversation around her, and the same thing can happen for everyone else. Now, one thing that I'm doing to try and let more people know about these risks is this YouTube channel right here. My mission is basically just to get more people to listen to the warnings of the experts and make it more likely that we do get the international treaty that we need to stop the development of superintelligence. I'm going to be stepping things up over the next couple of months, so if you want to stay up to date with AI news, if you want to see this movement grow, if you want to find out more ways you can help, then the subscribe button is right there, just waiting to be clicked. Now, we mentioned them about a minute ago, but the fourth way you can help here is by getting involved with an activist group like PauseAI. PauseAI was the first volunteer-led organization that began to build a movement to try and pressure governments to do something about the race to superintelligence. And as far as I know, they're one of just 2 groups that have ever protested about this issue. Last year, they held the largest ever AI safety protest outside the offices of Google DeepMind in London. And when I say largest ever, I mean 80 people, which was a lot more than they had at their first protest, which I think was just 2 people, and that's very good growth over that time. But still, 80 people is nowhere near enough given the stakes of this issue. But what that means is the marginal impact of one extra person joining one of these protests is ginormous. It means that you attending one of these protests is not going to be the difference between 100,000 people and 100,001 people, but it could be the difference between 50 and 51 people, right? So just your presence alone increases the attendance by 2%, which is pretty good. PauseAI is still pretty young, as is the anti-superintelligence movement more broadly, but it is growing, and I think it would be a great idea to get in while it's still pretty early. I personally joined PauseAI pretty much as soon as it was founded. I read an article by the founder, Yoop, and I was just immediately convinced that that was what we should be doing. Most people involved in PauseAI, especially at the beginning, had no experience with activism whatsoever. They didn't know what an activist group was meant to do. They were kind of just winging it. But we did feel very strongly that protests on the street would contribute to missing energy that there was at the time. If it is true that a handful of companies are racing to build super intelligent AI that could kill everyone, well, where are the protests? PauseAI is somewhat of an attempt to fill in that gap. I remember when I first went to my first PauseAI protest in London in 2023, I had never been to a protest before. I had no idea what to expect. It was pretty nerve-wracking. But when I showed up, it turned out that all of those things were true for most of the other people that were there, right? Protesting does work. PauseAI's protests have got so much media coverage, and it really just opens up the conversation, is a clear signal to politicians and to everyone else that people take this seriously enough that they're willing to go out on the streets and protest. But protesting isn't the only thing that PauseAI does. Anything you can imagine an activist group doing, PauseAI is pretty much involved in. I think there are chapters across 15 or so countries now, all of which have local chapters within them. And if there isn't one in your country or in your area, well, you can take it upon yourself to set one up. Now, before we get to the final action, we've got a little bonus round, everybody. And that is simply just to learn more about the issue. Being more informed, of course, is going to help with everything else that we do. There's a hell of a lot to be learned right here on YouTube. So of course, I'm going to recommend the OG of AI safety himself, Robert Miles. He was talking about all of this way before ChatGPT came out. He had videos on Computer File. He's also got his own channel, and he explains very well why the alignment problem is so difficult, why we can't just easily get super intelligent AI to do what we want. So I definitely recommend his channel.
In the same way that you don't want to take a pill that will make you want to kill your kids.
I'm also going to recommend one video of his, which is probably the most powerful video on the internet, at least that I've seen. And it's called "There's No Rule That Says We Make It." I'm not going to explain any more. I just recommend that you go and watch that. If you want to subscribe to a podcast on the topic, I can recommend Doom Debates and 80,000 Hours. For books, it won't be surprising that I'm going to recommend If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, which is right here. Definitely worth read if you haven't picked up a copy yet. And to keep up with the news, Transformer is probably the place that offers the best coverage of AI in a way that's truly cognizant of the risks. They also occasionally have opinion pieces like why we need a moratorium on superintelligence research and the left is missing out on AI, both of which came out recently and are both worth a read. As a little side note here, all of these links are going to be in the description. And I'm also going to have a Substack post, which will include a few extra bits that I couldn't fit in the video. And in general, of course, following a few accounts on social media that are regularly talking about this is going to be hugely beneficial. I'll leave a link to a list of Twitter accounts that I think you should follow. But when it comes to other platforms like Instagram and TikTok, there really aren't that many people talking about this issue, which is a huge shame. And that brings me on to my final suggested action for you, which is actually to make videos yourself. Now, this isn't going to be for everyone, obviously, I understand that. But given the stakes here, given how important this topic is, making videos is so neglected. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have realized that this is what I'm doing. As I mentioned earlier, I'm making videos on this topic because the number of people doing it, as I said, is just so low that even though I'm not the most knowledgeable, I'm not the most eloquent, and there are many other people that could probably do a much better job at this than I can, the reality is that they're just not, right? So I'm trying to give it a go. There's an endless number of papers, of blog posts, of long form podcasts, of books about the issue. But the reality is that there's a huge portion of the population that just don't consume any of those things, right? But that doesn't mean that they have any less of a right to know about the threat to their life, the threat to their families. As I said, a large part of the benefit of making videos is to explain the problem in an engaging way, but it's also just to provide a bit of like social proof, right? Because it's one thing reading about the dangers of superintelligence, but to actually hear someone and see their face, it makes it feel a little bit more real, I think. So that's why I think you should consider making videos. If you have previous experience, then great. But even if you don't, I think it's something that you can learn, probably easier than you think. I'll also add that if you speak a language other than English, then videos in that language could have a huge impact, because from what I hear and from the little bits of Spanish YouTube that I watch, there really isn't that much content talking about the existential risk in languages other than English. Now, obviously, this is a massive jump in the deep end compared to all of the other tasks we've spoken about. But if you think it could be up your street, I'd absolutely recommend giving it a go. If you do decide that you want to make videos on this, then just comment down below your channel and I'll go and be your first subscriber if you don't have one yet. Now, so many of you will be concerned about this, but maybe find the idea of activism a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's something you've never done before. I think that's true of the majority of the population, but the ridiculous situation that we find ourselves in warrants doing something a little bit uncomfortable. Now, we could have been born at any time throughout human history. There have been about 110 billion of us who have ever existed. And by pure chance, it just so happens that you and I are born in a time when our technology permits us to build something that's smarter than we are, but we're not yet wise enough to do that without causing our own annihilation. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that was many centuries away. I wish I could live my life comfortable with the knowledge that I'm going to make it to old age, I'm going to see my grandchildren grow up, and I can leave a world behind for them to enjoy. But on our current trajectory, that probably won't happen. This is not science fiction. The real experts in the real world are terrified. They think there's a decent chance that their own children will be killed.
My emotional turning point was with my grandson. I realized that it wasn't clear if they would have a life 20 years from now.
There are a few thousand reckless ideologues who are racing to build super intelligent AI. They're driven by wishful thinking, they're blinded by power, and they are not going to stop voluntarily. It's up to us to get our governments to stop them. Now, I understand the urge to bury your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, but unfortunately it is. Now, luckily, we can still choose to not destroy ourselves. We can still choose to not build super intelligent AI. That option is there for us to take, but it won't be there for much longer. Any action that anyone can take that makes it more likely that we make that decision is worth taking. There's no one coming to save us. It's just us. There are no adults in the room. The human story can come to an end. There is no law of the universe that prohibits that from happening. But you know what? I don't want it to. I want to be able to watch a sunset, to enjoy a beer, to go to the football, to have my morning coffee and a poo, to laugh, to travel, to sit in the sun and read, to make music, to learn a new language, to get absolutely shit-faced, to listen to the sounds of children playing and birds chirping, to binge watch the whole of Peep Show for the 10th time, to give a dog the best belly scratch of his whole entire life, to puff on a fat cigar, which I've never done and I don't know why, and I really want to do now. And I want everyone else on the planet to be able to enjoy those things and do whatever it is that they enjoy. And that is what AI companies are threatening to destroy. And that's what we're fighting to protect. And I hope you can join me in doing that. Links are all down below. I hope you enjoy your weekend.